Ever since Marvel Comics set up their own movie division and established their cinematic universe with Iron Man in 2008, the movie-going community and film industry has had their eyes on DC Comics and pondered what their response would be. Green Lantern was meant to be Warner Brothers' introduction to connected storytelling, but after that critically and commercially bombed, they regrouped and teamed with Zack Snyder for 2013's Man of Steel, and the fallout from that was mixed. Even the movie's most ardent defenders admit that Man of Steel's foundations for a cinematic universe are shaky at best, but Warner Brothers have invested hundreds of millions of dollars and the next 5 years of their release schedule to future DC movies like Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, 2 Justice League movies, The Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, and Green Lantern Corps. But before that, we have Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which will be a new secondary launchpad to this universe. Will the inclusion of Ben Affleck and his Argo co-writer Chris Terrio give the universe a more solid foundation than Man of Steel did, or is this juggernaut of a film akin to building a castle on top of quicksand? It's a big, ambitious movie with a 2.5-hour runtime, plentiful DC cameos, foreshadowing, and a cliffhanger ending, as well as a $250 million budget at least. And I can't quite comprehend how any of the higher-ups at Warner Brothers thought this movie was a good idea. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is such a staggering misfire on a conceptual level that it's legitimately hard to quantify or put into words. This isn't a movie that didn't come together in the editing room, folks. This is a top-to-bottom disaster on a fundamental level, right down to its genesis. I am literally speechless at the idea that dozens of higher-ups at Warner Brothers looked at that script and that story and thought, yep, this is worth investing billions of dollars and half a decade of tentpole release dates into. There is so much wrong with this movie that it's hard to know where to even start. So let's talk about the beginning, the fallout from Man of Steel. In the context of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, it is 18 months later, but the audience aren't told what happened during that time. And it's clear that Superman has not been changed one iota by his experiences. Those who didn't like him snapping Zod's neck in Man of Steel were hoping that that incident would be the catalyst for why he would never kill again. But his first moments in this movie, 18 months later, have Superman commit an unwarranted, unjustified, and preposterous act of murder in Africa. Speaking of Africa, this is actually the inciting incident of the movie. A terrorist attack takes place, Lois Lane is put in danger, Jimmy Olsen is killed. No, really, Superman comes to save the day, kills a terrorist in cold blood, and then the scene ends. Then for the next hour of the movie, all of the other characters keep saying how Superman is responsible for these events and he should be tried and that he's a menace, but the audience aren't told exactly what Superman was supposed to have done, so the inciting incident doesn't actually mean anything, and the characters are constantly referring to events that the audience aren't privy to, and to top it all off, there was no need for an inciting incident in Africa to turn the world against Superman. The destruction of Metropolis in Man of Steel is enough. In fact, despite it being 18 months later, it's established that the Kryptonian world engines are still at the bottom of the ocean. Why has Superman or the government not cleaned them up yet? In fact, if that had happened, then Lex Luthor would not have been able to get his hands on kryptonite. We later learn that the incident in Africa was actually orchestrated by Lex Luthor in order to frame Superman. You see, Lex hates Superman because okay, there is no reason. In fact, exactly what Lex Luthor's company does isn't even said because the movie does not give a crap about world building. Incidentally, this may not matter to audience members, but this movie does not do a good job at introducing these characters to the uninitiated. The movie never actually establishes what Wayne Industries is or what Bruce Wayne does and how he got his fortune. Obviously, most audience members know the backstory of Batman, but it's demonstrative of Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio's utter ineptitude at world building and storytelling, despite making a launchpad movie for a cinematic universe. But let me back up. Lois Lane was able to trace the incident in Africa back to Lex Luthor because the soldiers were equipped with experimental bullets which only Lex Luthor's company uses, so he practically signed the crime scene. But why he used experimental bullets is never explained and only exists just so Lois Lane can trace it back to him for the sake of the narrative. Holy fuck, this movie. Later on, the US hold a Senate hearing and invite Superman to attend in order to say his piece, but Lex places a suicide bomber in there and kills dozens of innocents, his own personal assistant, presumably, members of the government, with Superman being the only survivor. Was this done to frame Superman again? Possibly, but as soon as the explosion happens, the audience see news reports that confirm it was a bomber who hid the explosives in a wheelchair that Lex Luthor gave him, so that attempt to frame him failed, meaning it was absolutely pointless to to the plot, and then Lex Luthor engineers a scheme to get Batman to distrust Superman, even though he already does, so he can steal the kryptonite, even though he was trying to keep it from Batman earlier on, so he can fight and kill Superman, even though Lex has a backup plan in the form of Doomsday, but we'll get to him later. Lex Luthor's plan is not only bone-dead stupid and self-contradictory, but it's needlessly complicated, and he doesn't actually have to do anything. In the end, it turns out that Lex Luthor knows about some oncoming approaching threat that is going to destroy the world, presumably Darkseid. But if that's the case, then why the hell has he concocted a plan to destroy Superman in the first place, the only person strong enough to combat such a threat? What is Lex's endgame? I am like 1,200 words into this review and I'm barely even scratching the surface. That's how much of a colossal failure this movie is. But let's go back to Batman's involvement in Lex's plan. Batman tells Alfred that Lex is trying to smuggle a dirty bomb into Gotham and he needs to intercept it. However, it turns out that he was lying and that it's actually kryptonite and he wants to use it to kill Superman. How Batman even knew about the kryptonite and that it could be used as a Superman killer is something the movie never establishes, even though later on in the movie, Batman hacks into Lex Luthor's files and discovers everything, but that's after he already knew about the kryptonite, because Alfred confronts him about this lie later on, and this screenplay was co-written by an Academy Award winner. The story structure is so hackneyed and the pace so terribly done that I don't think that whoever wrote and edited this story has ever watched a movie in their entire lives. Scenes come and go without any real purpose. There are no character beats to speak of because the plot is so needlessly convoluted that the first 70 minutes are entirely made up of exposition as we hop from location to location, but with no effective progress being made. This movie clocks in at around 150 minutes, but it feels like the first act doesn't actually start for around 90 minutes, and yes, you heard that right. I honestly cannot imagine sitting through a 3-hour cut on Blu-ray. Seriously, just the thought of it makes me wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. In the meanwhile, we have some groundwork being laid for future movies. How does this work? Well, Wonder Woman is on hand with her own subplot as she investigates LexCorp, who have knowledge of other superhumans such as the Flash, Aquaman and Cyborg, and there's an entire scene dedicated to Wonder Woman watching almost literal trailers for future DC movies, and no, I have not made that up. We also have numerous out-of-place, never referred to again dream sequences, and at one point, the Flash shows up to talk about Lois Lane destroying the world or something that Bruce Wayne is right about Superman, or some nonsense like that. The audio is so distorted that it's almost impossible to get an accurate sense of what is being said. And then Bruce Wayne wakes up from a dream within a dream, and the entire 5-minute sequence is never referenced or brought up again afterwards. And once again, I'm not making this up. But for the main crux of the narrative, the fight between Batman and Superman, my main concern going into the movie from the trailers was why these iconic figures would be fighting. And after watching the final movie, I am still wondering why they were fighting. Batman's motivations are clear-cut if a bit extreme, as he was in Metropolis when it was destroyed and many of his friends died, but the movie doesn't have any confidence in this perfectly reasonable motive because he also has Lex Luthor send cryptic messages in the mail framing Superman for stupid stuff, etc. As for Superman's motivations, he has none. As Clark Kent the journalist, he briefly talks to Bruce Wayne about Batman being a vigilante, but Superman answers to no authority either, so it's hypocritical. Actually, while I remember, it's established that Batman has been working for 20 years in Gotham, and that the Joker exists in this universe as he killed Robin and his suit is displayed in the Batcave. You've seen this in the trailers. But no one other than Bruce Wayne and Alfred acknowledges this history. Literally everyone else in the movie, from Clark Kent, Perry White, news reporters, police officers and criminals, act like Batman has just turned up. This is meant to be a cinematic universe where continuity is a vital component, but here it can't even remain consistent from scene to scene, let alone movie to movie. Holy fuck, did not a single person actually proofread the script before throwing around $500 million at it? There's a scene where Batman is taking down criminals in the Batmobile, and then out of nowhere Superman shows up and makes him crash before giving him a warning saying the Bat is dead. But why Superman was there, why he didn't stop the criminals that Batman was chasing down, and why he hates Batman is never established. In fact, Superman feels like a non-entity in his own movie. Superman comes across like the ultimate hipster as he broods and comes across as rather miserable, but he doesn't actually say anything. This makes the 18-month gap after Man of Steel such a puzzling inclusion, because despite all of this time to find his place and collect his thoughts, he doesn't seem to have any sort of stance on himself. When he arrives at the Senate hearing, I was hoping that he would give a speech talking about his motives, his ethics, but throughout the entire sequence he never says a word. It's a massive missed opportunity. And while I'm on the subject of talking, why does no one in this movie talk to each other. Batman and Superman only exchange vague threats and in-jokes in the 90 seconds of screen time they have before the titular fight takes place. They never verbally debate their sides, they never communicate, they just go straight to threats and straight to violence. There's no sense of escalation is what I'm getting at. So when Superman and Batman finally throw down almost 2 frickin' hours into the movie, it not only feels unmotivated, but there's been so little build-up to it. It starts with Superman being given an ultimatum by Lex Luthor: kill Batman or Martha Kent dies, which was pointless because Batman wants to fight Superman anyway, so there's no reason for the hostage setup, but I guess they wanted to give Martha more than 5 lines of dialogue. And Superman tries to explain the situation to Batman before triggering a mechanical trap which Superman effortlessly destroys. He tries again to talk to Batman about Lex's plan, but then another trap triggers which once again he subdues without breaking a sweat, and then just thinks, fuck it, let's just kill this guy, and starts throwing him through buildings instead of talking it out. Batman doesn't even use his kryptonite weaponry for another 2 minutes, so Superman has no reason to believe he can be injured by Batman. So why does he devolve so quickly into murder? Just pin Batman down and just talk to him. Why is Superman such an asshole? So yeah, a good 2 hours into Batman v Superman, the two actually throw down and the fight lasts about 5 minutes and is phenomenally disappointing. Oh, there are a few cool looking moments, but there's zero emotional investment and nothing at stake, so it's all just flash with no substance, and it just demonstrates what everybody on Earth already knew. If Batman had time to prepare, was armed with kryptonite, and Superman was vastly holding back, Batman would win. That was worth waiting 2 hours to find out, but Batman spares Superman's life because he and his dead mother have the same first name, Martha. Holy shit, this movie. But Lex Luthor has a backup plan, as he uses the kryptonite technology to combine General Zod's corpse with his own blood, and that creates an unstoppable abomination that is practically invincible and gets stronger the more it fights. Wait, what? Yeah, Doomsday comes that out of nowhere and with that little explanation. So Doomsday shows up, destroys dozens of miles of city with orange beams, and Batman deduces that the only thing that can kill it is a kryptonite spear that he has back in Gotham that was intended for Superman. So instead of leaving Doomsday alone on an uninhabited island and fly back to Gotham in his Batwing to get the spear and then come back, he lures Doomsday to Gotham, where he kills countless people and causes incalculable collateral damage. All the while, it will be chasing Batman whilst he tries to find the spear. So essentially, Batman does the exact same thing he was mad at Superman doing with Zod in Man of Steel, and taking a dangerous threat to a populated area needlessly, and is indirectly responsible for all of the damage caused. Wait, what? But it turns out Lois Lane threw the spear away for reasons, and Superman needs to go and get it back, whilst Wonder Woman keeps Doomsday occupied and the writers desperately look for a way for Batman to be useful. So Superman, spear in hand and severely weakened by the presence of kryptonite, stabs Doomsday with it and the two die, even though Wonder Woman could have used the spear as she's taken multiple direct hits from Doomsday and came out unscathed, meaning that Superman's self-sacrifice was completely unnecessary. Wait, what? But the main issue with the final battle, apart from it being an absolute visual mess, but more on that later, is that none of the three heroes actually talk to each other. They never come up with a plan, they don't coordinate, they don't use tactics to defeat the enemy. There's no sense of the Trinity becoming a team and demonstrating that even a god like Superman needs help, that Batman is a master tactician, and that Wonder Woman is a fearless warrior. Their plan just amounts to hitting their foe a lot, even though Doomsday is an enemy that gets stronger the more you hit it. Wait, what? The three do come together for the final blow as Wonder Woman uses her lasso to keep Doomsday in place, Batman uses his last kryptonite gas grenade, and Superman uses the spear. But none of those elements coming together are coordinated, it's just blind luck and coincidence. Not to compare DC and Marvel too much, but the climactic battle in the Avengers doesn't just work because it's blind spectacle, but because it's layered with dozens of meaningful character beats and the heroes interact with each other beyond punches and kicks. I'm bringing the party to you. Watch you getting sleepy, I'm always angry, they can't bank worth a damn, etc. That sequence is a marvel of dynamic cooperation, and it makes me wonder what on earth Zack Snyder will be doing with future Justice League movies. But everything I've talked about so far, everything is from a story standpoint. All of this stuff should have been fixed in the writing room. This is stuff that should have been fixed before filming even started. The flaws are so glaringly obvious that there are literally only two explanations. One, Warner Brothers put so much faith in Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio that they just blindly went forward without checking the story or the screenplay. Or two, no one involved in the creative process either knew what they were doing or cared. Neither outcomes are good. So now that I've spent around 3,000 words breaking down how terrible the script and story is, we can actually talk about what went in front of the cameras. Henry Cavill as Superman is a one-note broody asshole. There's honestly not much more to talk about here, but when it comes to establishing Batman, for the most part, Ben Affleck and Jeremy Irons are the sole bright spots in the movie, while the character himself is too flatly written and not given enough effective character moments to leave any sort of emotional impact. I think that visually, we do have the best version of Batman we've ever seen in a movie. Ben Affleck's casting was a great decision. He's absolutely invested in this material. His rage and intensity come across effectively without being too ridiculous, and his rapport with Alfred is really engaging. We all know that Affleck has multi-picture deals with Warner Brothers as Batman, but I really hope that Jeremy Irons will be back as well, because while he's the most unconventional Alfred we've had to date, he is another great casting choice. On the other hand, we have Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and nothing about this casting works. Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is possibly the worst comic book movie villain of all time, as he's so ridiculously over the top that he doesn't feel like he could possibly exist in this universe, and bear in mind that this universe contains gods, men dressed as bats, and a mermaid-like man who can talk to fish. He has so many facial tics and such an unconventional delivery that it's laughable, and nothing is here to ground the character. His dialogue is laughable, his quirks are nonsensical, and I never once bought him as a legitimate threat to Superman, nor as a genius businessman. Literally nothing about this character or performance worked. I feel sorry for Jared Leto's Joker in the Suicide Squad, because there's nothing he can do in that movie that will be as insane and over the top as Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. We also have the casting of Gal Gadot, and while it's not as blindingly terrible as Eisenberg, it's still not a good choice. Oh, she looks great in the costume, and she's a beautiful woman who I believe as a sword-wielding badass, but every line of dialogue she's given is flat, monotone, and blandly delivered. This is just a lifeless and outright bad performance. Wonder Woman as a character seems to have absolutely no depth, and even in battle, she doesn't do anything particularly unique or memorable to make her stand out. It's possible that Zack Snyder just couldn't direct her, and that Patty Jenkins might do a much better job for next year's Wonder Woman movie, but as of right now, the most iconic female comic book character of all time is just a boring prop in her first ever on-screen movie appearance, and that realization kind of makes me want to curl up into a ball and ponder just on earth how this movie ever got released in this state. As for the rest of the cast, the performances are okay, but there's nothing that really stands out. Amy Adams, Lawrence Fishburne, Diane Lane, and even Kevin Costner, who turns up in a sort of maybe flashback or dream sequence, they do okay, although Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White shows up in this movie as an entirely different character than he was in Man of Steel. But because the movie is 99% made up of exposition, there's no human moments to allow you to connect with the characters or give the actors anything to work with. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is a joyless, drab, dull as dishwater movie, and my screening genuinely had a more vocal and enjoyable reaction to the Lego Batman teaser that played before the film.
Do you want to talk about how you're feeling?
I don't want to do that.
Sir.
No.
Sir.
No.
Sir.
No.
And I know there will be idiots that will call me biased against DC or Zack Snyder, or that I hate comic book movies. Both of those accusations, by the way, are provably false, but I honestly cannot imagine people enjoying this movie all the way through, or even for the majority of it. I'm sure that many people will enjoy the action scenes and the visceral nature, or just the novelty of Batman and Superman together, but those sequences don't even kick in until the last 30 minutes, leaving a prior 2 hours of moping around with zero direction, zero structure, no narrative heft, no characters worth caring about, or effective world building. Practically nothing about this movie works on a creative storytelling level. There are some striking images, most of them have been seen in the trailers, such as Bruce Wayne running towards the collapsing building. In fact, the opening sequence with Bruce Wayne in Metropolis is a great set piece. We also have some stunning visual tableaus, such as the Batmobile driving into the Batcave, Superman pulling a shipwreck across ice, Wonder Woman's entrance, and more. But when you combine moments like that with Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Irons' Alfred, we have about 10 minutes of a movie that are actually watchable in a 2.5-hour movie, max. And of course the fight scenes are an absolute slog. The titular fight is generic and conventional and only lasts a few minutes, and the fight between Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman and Doomsday is an objectively terrible mess. To signify that Doomsday is absorbing all of the punches thrown at him, he glows orange. So who in the holy mother of fuck thought it would be a good idea to set the fight in front of orange flames? And the camera is often so close to the action that the screen is just filled filled with orange and there's no actual choreography on display. It's a fucking mess. Also, as awesome as the Batmobile looks, and it does look awesome, we never actually get a decent look at it, and Zack Snyder cannot direct vehicle chases to save his life. The CGI on Doomsday is about on par with the cave troll from the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, but the rest of the film looks okay with a few inspired moments of cinematography. The fight we've seen in the third trailer where Batman beats up a dozen guys would have made for an incredible introduction to Batman as a character near the beginning, but it actually happens in the last 15 minutes, and at that point I was just exhausted with the movie and wanted it to be over. Once again, this movie was edited and structured by someone who didn't know what the hell they were doing. Two brilliant composers, Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL, team up to deliver a musical score of mediocre proportions. Honestly, despite the talent here, none of the music really stood out, and the piano motif from Man of Steel got way too repetitive. Costumes and makeup are fine, and the $250 million budget is clearly up on screen, but it just feels like the massive amount of locations and globe hopping don't justify what should have been an incredibly simple story. I'm tempted to say that the movie only filmed in numerous countries and locations just so that Warner Brothers could get tax breaks or something. Also, I know that this is a nitpick, but it's worth mentioning. The way Zack Snyder photographs the male form makes Joel Schumacher's bat nipples and bat ass look classy by comparison. Just saying. So after all of that, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is a utter failure on every single creative level. How a movie this big and this important to Warner Brothers, with decades upon decades of source material to draw upon, and this many people involved and invested in its quality and success, could turn out to be this bad is something that will rock the movie industry to its core over the next few years. With DC's Suicide Squad basically in the can, and Wonder Woman finishing filming anytime now, with Justice League Part 1 filming next month, with at least 5 other movies in pre-production, expect to hear news over the next few weeks of major firings, reshoots, movie delays, and even outright cancellations, because building a cinematic universe upon the rotten, broken, and decrepit foundations of a movie like Batman v Superman is akin to the travel industry building more hydrogen-fueled airships after the Hindenburg disaster. I normally don't do this in these reviews, but if Warner Brothers want to try and salvage the cinematic universe and recoup any losses, then their best plan is to cancel all DC movies in pre-production and release their current projects before a reboot. Release Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, and make one Justice League movie, without Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio obviously, to finish the story. Mark my words, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is going to be a cautionary tale on how not to make a cinematic universe, and I just wish it was a tale that didn't have to have such a depressing ending that will surely kill the mainstream blockbuster careers of almost everyone involved on the creative side. Is it the worst comic book movie ever made? I can't go that far, but it's easily the most high-profile, far-reaching catastrophe of the subgenre, and the worst movie to bear the DC branding of the 21st century so far. Ben Affleck and Jeremy Irons are the sole bright spots, as well as a few effective images, but in a movie this long and a movie this portentous, it's simply not enough to recommend to anyone but the morbidly curious. For a movie this big, that should have been so simple and just visceral blockbuster fun, how could a movie this big and this important turn out to be this bad? I give Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice half a star out of 5.
It's time you learn what it means to be a man. Stay down! If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
Hello everyone, thanks for listening to my review. You can find these reviews a day or two early on my website, www.trilbee.com, so be sure to visit there where you can find a written version and other written content. But more importantly, what did you think of the film? Be sure to let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe for more movie related analysis. Be sure to hit that like button because that really helps me out, and you can support my content through Patreon and also get your name in the credits with these other lovely people and get exclusive perks and updates. I'll see you folks next time.